Like, there's a lone wolf part of me that maybe you can relate to, but I like being by myself.
A rivalry born in rage, a friendship buried under decades of silence, and now an unexpected confession. James Hetfield has just opened a door fans never thought he'd touch again. His complicated, emotional history with Dave Mustaine and his band Megadeth. We all know the headlines, fights, firings, and decades of bitterness, but what really happened behind the guitars, the fame, and the music? Why now? Why speak up at 61? And what does he truly think about the man who helped build Metallica, then turned into its fiercest rival? We dug through interviews, confessions, and lost chances to unpack this long-running feud, one that changed the course of heavy metal forever. Firestarter in the studio. In 1981, fate collided with ambition when four young musicians crossed paths, unaware they were about to redefine the very essence of metal. James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, two driven kids from California with an insatiable hunger for sound, had just started molding what would become Metallica. But they needed something, or someone, to electrify their chemistry. That's when Dave Mustaine entered the picture. A lightning rod of raw talent and unchecked aggression, Mustaine wasn't just another guitarist. He was a storm in human form, a musician who played with fury and lived with even more. From day one, Mustaine's influence on Metallica was impossible to ignore. His guitar work was jagged, sharp, and deeply emotional. It brought menace, chaos, and edge to songs like The Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire. Many fans don't realize just how much of early Metallica's DNA carried his fingerprints. Without Dave's relentless energy, those tracks might have lacked the searing force that helped ignite the thrash metal movement. But genius has its price. Mustaine's brilliance came wrapped in volatility. His drinking spiraled out of control. He picked fights, clashed with crew members, and disrupted rehearsals with unpredictable outbursts. Even in moments of triumph, tension was thick. The band admired his skills, but feared his temper. It wasn't just music they were making, they were living in a pressure cooker. One telling moment laid it bare. When Mustaine's dog damaged bassist Ron McGovney's car, tempers exploded. Hetfield, always fiercely loyal to the group, confronted Mustaine, and in a drunken rage, Dave responded with violence. The punch he threw that night may have sealed his fate. It wasn't just about the dog, it was about control, trust, and a band on the verge of collapse. Behind the scenes, Hetfield and Ulrich wrestled with a decision they never wanted to make. They needed Mustaine's fire, but they feared it would burn the whole project down. And so, just days before Metallica was set to enter the studio for their debut album Kill 'Em All, they made the call. They fired him. No discussion, no warning. They put Mustaine on a Greyhound bus back to Los Angeles with nothing but his gear and a hard goodbye. The impact was devastating. "It was the biggest betrayal of my life," Mustaine later said. "I helped start that band. I poured everything into it, and they tossed me out like garbage." The pain didn't fade with time. It festered, fueling a decades-long rivalry that shaped both men's careers. Hetfield later acknowledged the guilt. "We were all wild back then," he said. "But Dave took it further than we could handle. We did what we had to do, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." In Hetfield's mind, it wasn't just a band decision, it was the loss of a brother. And yet, Mustaine didn't disappear. He transformed. From the ashes of rejection, he built Megadeth, a band crafted not just to succeed, but to eclipse Metallica. Every riff he wrote, every lyric he screamed, was a declaration of war. Metallica had tried to silence him, But instead, they created a rival who would become their mirror, their shadow, and their fiercest challenger. The fire they lit together didn't just burn bridges, it ignited something far more powerful. Dave Mustaine wasn't walking away defeated. He was gearing up for a war of his own. Forged in fury. Dave Mustaine didn't walk away from Metallica. He was cast out, bruised in ego and spirit. And as the bus rolled back toward Los Angeles in 1983, Mustaine wasn't just staring out the window. He was planning revenge. In those long hours of isolation, a new mission took shape in his mind. Not just to form another band, but to build something so powerful it would haunt the very people who had exiled him. That mission would become Megadeth. This wasn't a clean slate, it was war. Mustaine wasn't creating from peace, he was creating from rage. Everything he felt, betrayal, humiliation, anger, was funneled into his songwriting. And in just 2 years, that fury erupted onto the world in the form of Killing Is My Business. And Business Is Good. Released in 1985, it was chaotic, intense, and technically brutal. It didn't sound like a debut. It sounded like a threat. One track in particular, Mechanics, stood out. Fast, ferocious, and unapologetic. It was a reworked version of Metallica's The Four Horsemen, a song Mustaine had co-written. By rebranding it under his name and speeding it up, he was sending a message. This was mine all along. But Mustaine wasn't just shouting at Metallica. He was reshaping metal. Unlike Metallica, who by then were moving toward a broader audience, Megadeth doubled down on complexity. Intricate guitar work, whiplash tempo changes, aggressive vocals. Mustaine wasn't just trying to match Metallica's energy. He was trying to surpass it in every measurable way. He didn't want to be compared. He wanted to be crowned. The divide between the two bands widened quickly. Metallica began gaining mainstream traction, particularly after the success of Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. They were praised for evolving their sound, adding melody, structure, even moments of vulnerability. Megadeth, on the other hand, remained firmly in the trenches of pure thrash. And that divide became a kind of spiritual battleground for fans. Metallica was the band that matured. Megadeth was the band that refused to compromise. In interview after interview, Mustaine poured gasoline on the fire. He called Metallica sellouts, mocked their lyrics, accused them of coasting on fame. And his fans, many of them musicians themselves, loved him for it. He was the anti-hero, the guy who had been wronged and came back swinging. Mustaine's identity became inseparable from that bitterness. And, for better or worse, it gave his music its edge. Behind the scenes, Hetfield and Ulrich paid attention, even if they rarely admitted it. They listened to Megadeth albums, they saw the headlines, they heard the venom. Hetfield later confessed, "We knew Dave was out there. We could feel it. And yeah, it made us work harder." But where Mustaine externalized his pain, Hetfield internalized his. His answer wasn't confrontation, it was elevation. He focused on making Metallica so great that no feud could overshadow it. Still, the shadow lingered. No matter how many albums Metallica sold, no matter how big their tours got, Mustaine was there, snarling in interviews, pushing technical boundaries, always reminding the world that he had been part of the foundation. And for many fans, that unfiltered aggression was what made Megadeth real. By the late 1980s, Megadeth had become more than Mustaine's revenge project. It was a legitimate force in metal. Albums like Peace Sells, but Who's Buying, and So Far, So Good. So What? Weren't just commercial successes. They were artistic statements. Mustaine had gone from exiled guitarist to visionary frontman. But that rise didn't bring peace. If anything, it deepened the wound. Because even as Megadeth climbed higher, the world still compared him to Metallica. And that comparison, fair or not, kept the rivalry burning. But while Mustaine roared through every solo with vengeance, Hetfield responded with something quieter, more enduring. His answer wasn't in interviews or insults, but in the way Metallica evolved, the quiet fuel behind Metallica. While Dave Mustaine screamed his frustrations into every mic and riffed his pain into every record, James Hetfield said almost nothing. At least, not out loud. He didn't throw verbal jabs in interviews or air his emotions publicly. But behind the calm facade was a man grinding harder, writing deeper, and channeling every ounce of unspoken rivalry into Metallica's rise. In his silence, Hetfield found power and purpose. Mustaine had been a force of nature in Metallica's early days. His departure left a hole, but also created a space Hetfield could finally fill. With Kirk Hammett replacing Mustaine on lead guitar, Hetfield stepped up, not just as frontman, but as the emotional engine of the band. He carried the guilt of Mustaine's firing, the pressure of living up to the potential they had lost, and the hunger to prove Metallica had made the right choice. Their next move was critical, and Ride the Lightning delivered. Released in 1984, it marked a dramatic leap forward. The riffs were sharper, the compositions tighter, the themes darker. This wasn't just thrash, it was evolution. Hetfield's songwriting had matured, digging into existential fears and societal disillusionment. The band wasn't reacting to Mustaine's attacks, they were outrunning them. But that didn't mean Hetfield was untouched by the noise. In later interviews, he admitted the competition never fully left his mind. "We knew Dave was always watching," he said. "And in a weird way, that pushed us. We didn't want to fall behind. We couldn't." This wasn't about keeping up. It was about staying ahead. Master of Puppets in 1986 was their declaration of dominance. Widely regarded as one of the greatest metal albums of all time, it was Hetfield's masterpiece. With tracks like Battery, Welcome Home, Sanitarium, and the title track, the album balanced brutality with complexity. It proved that Metallica wasn't just surviving without Mustaine, they were thriving. Still, comparisons followed them. Hardcore fans dissected solos, credits, and riffs, always trying to determine whose vision had truly driven early Metallica. The name Mustaine lingered in forums, articles, and debates. And while Mustaine fed into the rivalry publicly, Hetfield stayed quiet. He didn't need to justify Metallica's decisions, he let the music speak. But internally, Hetfield was never entirely at peace. He later confessed that Mustaine's relentless presence in the press wore on him. "It's hard when someone won't let go of the past," Hetfield admitted, "especially when you're trying to move forward." That statement revealed what many fans had suspected. Hetfield hadn't buried the past, he'd buried it alive. Throughout the late 1980s and early 90s, Metallica expanded their sound. They embraced melody. They wrote ballads like Fade to Black and Nothing Else Matters. They angered purists, but also reached millions. And Justice for All showcased their musical ambitions, while the Black Album made them a global phenomenon. Some fans called it a sellout. Mustaine certainly did, but Hetfield wasn't chasing trends, he was chasing immortality. And in doing so, he was shaping a legacy that extended far beyond thrash. He didn't just want to be better than Mustaine, he wanted Metallica to be untouchable. Behind the scenes, Hetfield wrestled with more than music. His battles with addiction, self-doubt, and fame added new weight to his quiet intensity. He rarely lashed out, but when he wrote songs like The God That Failed or The Unforgiven, you could feel the unresolved pain in every chord. That pain, some of it rooted in the Metallica-Megadeth fracture, never truly went away, but it became fuel, not for feuding, but for building. Hetfield's refusal to engage Mustaine directly wasn't weakness, it was focus. He was too busy crafting albums, breaking records, and shaping history. For years, Hetfield said nothing, but silence can say everything. And when the two men finally sat across from each other, the past came crashing into the room. The conversation that cut deep. By the early 2000s, both Metallica and Megadeth had become institutions in heavy metal. Their catalogs were vast, their influence unmatched, and their fan bases deeply loyal. Yet despite their legendary status, something remained unresolved. Something both bands had long avoided. The emotional wreckage left behind after Dave Mustaine's exit from Metallica. That pain, buried for decades beneath platinum records and sold-out tours, finally surfaced in a moment neither fans nor the artists could have anticipated. In 2004, Metallica released Some Kind of Monster, a raw, behind-the-scenes documentary chronicling their inner turmoil during the making of the Saint Anger album. It was meant to showcase the band's struggle with identity, addiction, and reinvention. But in the middle of that chaos came a surprise no one expected: a sit-down between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine. For the first time since 1983, they were face to face, alone in a room, with cameras rolling. The footage is unforgettable. Mustaine, once the aggressive, defiant voice in interviews, appeared vulnerable. Gone was the bravado. In its place was a man still nursing wounds left by a firing that took everything from him. He told Hetfield plainly, "You never even said thank you. It's like you just threw me away." There was no performance in his voice, just decades of unspoken grief. Hetfield sat across from him, visibly uneasy, but listening. He wasn't defensive. He didn't justify or deny. Instead, he explained, "At the time, we were just trying to survive." He recalled the early chaos, the illegal substances, the drinking, the volatile personalities, and admitted that letting Mustaine go wasn't personal. It was survival. But there was something in his tone that went beyond logic. It was remorse. This was no staged reconciliation. It was two men confronting a shared history that neither had ever really come to terms with. For Mustaine, it was about respect, about dignity, about being erased from a legacy he helped build. For Hetfield, it was about guilt, about a decision made in youth that had haunted his silence ever since. The conversation didn't end with hugs or forgiveness. In fact, it left more questions than answers. But it shattered a barrier. Fans saw them not as rivals, not as frontmen, but as damaged people trying to untangle decades of pain. Mustaine admitted that, even with Megadeth's success, the shadow of Metallica followed him. Hetfield, too, seemed burdened by what might have been. Critics called the moment one of the most honest in any rock documentary. For the first time, the legendary feud wasn't reduced to magazine headlines or fanboy arguments. It was raw, messy, human, and it hinted at a possibility, however faint, that the wound could eventually heal. But healing doesn't happen in a single conversation. In the months and years that followed, Mustaine acknowledged that while the talk had meant something, it didn't resolve the deeper scars. He still felt sidelined, still felt that Metallica had refused to acknowledge his true contribution. Hetfield, too, retreated. While he spoke positively of the interaction, he didn't pursue deeper contact. It was as if the emotional weight was too much, too soon. Still, something had changed. In the years after Some Kind of Monster, Hetfield began referencing Mustaine more openly. Not with venom, but with recognition. And Mustaine, though still critical at times, also started acknowledging Hetfield with more complexity. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was evolution. For the fans, the scene became iconic. Proof that behind every great band are fractures, regrets, and unfinished conversations. The feud wasn't just about metal. It was about identity, about brotherhood lost. And for once, the music paused long enough to let the pain speak. Hetfield and Mustaine didn't resolve their past that day, but they exposed it. And that, in itself, was monumental. Because the silence that had fueled the rivalry for so long had finally broken. And from that fracture, a new kind of honesty emerged, one that would reshape how we saw them both. The words were raw, the wounds still fresh. But behind the pain, something unexpected had started to shift. The project that died in a sentence. After the emotional breakthrough captured in Some Kind of Monster, fans hoped it was the beginning of a long-overdue healing process between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine. For decades, their feud had been mythologized, analyzed, and reignited across interviews, albums, and headlines. But now, with the walls seemingly starting to come down, a new and unexpected possibility crept into the conversation. What if the two metal giants actually worked together again? The idea seemed unthinkable for years, but in the quiet aftermath of their face-to-face moment, the notion of collaboration began to surface, not from rumors or hopeful fans, but from Mustaine himself. In interviews between 2020 and 2023, he began dropping hints. At first, they sounded like off-handed wishes. Then, slowly, they sharpened into real discussions. Behind the scenes, Mustaine and Hetfield reportedly talked about working on something together. Something real. And not just any project. It was, according to Mustaine, a plan to revisit early Metallica material, tracks they had written together in the chaotic early days before the split. For longtime fans, it would have been historic. The chance to hear Hetfield and Mustaine side by side again, reuniting not as rivals, but as the original architects of thrash metal. The kind of musical reunion that didn't just promise nostalgia, it promised redemption. But what started as a flicker of hope was extinguished just as quickly. In a 2023 interview with Guitar.com, Mustaine revealed why the project never materialized. He said the idea was moving forward, the communication was open, and for once, the bitterness was at bay. Until he brought up one thing: publishing rights. Mustaine felt that he had never been properly credited for his contributions to certain early Metallica songs. It wasn't the first time he had said this publicly, but this time, it was said directly to Hetfield. According to Mustaine, Hetfield went silent. The conversation didn't escalate. There was no blow-up, no argument, just a pause, a shift, a door quietly closing. Hetfield, known for his emotional discipline and guarded nature, reportedly didn't respond. The project stopped there, not because of ego in the traditional sense, but by the deep and unresolved scar tissue surrounding who owned what and who deserved what after all these years. Mustaine, in recounting the moment, said it plainly. Once I brought that up, it was over. He wasn't being theatrical. He sounded resigned. Hurt, yes, but more than anything, disappointed. He had extended a hand, cautiously, and for a moment, it looked like it would be accepted. But instead, it reawakened every old issue that had poisoned their relationship for decades. Fans were devastated. The idea of Hetfield and Mustaine collaborating again on songs they had both bled over was more than a musical event. It would have been a spiritual coda to one of metal's most tragic fractures. But instead, it became another what if that joined the long list of missed opportunities between them. And yet, the fact that the conversation even got that far means something. Hetfield didn't immediately shut it down. He entertained it. That, in itself, marked a shift from the decades of silence and distance. There was no final burn, no door slammed shut. Just silence. A familiar, painful silence that has always existed between them. In a separate interview after the story broke, Hetfield gave a measured reply when asked about Mustaine's comments. "I respect him," he said. "I respect what he's done. That's where we are right now." It wasn't a rebuttal, but it wasn't a bridge either. It was Hetfield doing what he's always done, keeping his emotions close and letting his music speak instead. Ultimately, the failed project became a symbol of their entire relationship. Close, but complicated. Charged with potential, but paralyzed by old wounds. It proved that some histories are so deep, so layered with pride and pain, that even the best intentions can't fully untangle them. It could have been a moment of healing, but instead, it reopened every scar. And while Hetfield and Mustaine drifted again, their fans were left to carry the weight of the rivalry. When fans drew the battle lines, while Hetfield and Mustaine wrestled with their personal demons and the silent burden of a fractured brotherhood, their fans were waging a war of their own. And unlike the subtle, often unspoken nature of the feud between the two musicians, this war was loud, passionate, and fiercely tribal. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, fans divided themselves with an intensity that mirrored the riffs echoing from their stereos. You were either with Metallica or with Megadeth. There was no in-between. Metallica had the visibility. Their sound was massive, their albums were ubiquitous, and their shows filled arenas around the world. They were the juggernauts, the ones who broke through the metal underground and redefined what heavy music could be in the mainstream. With the release of the Black Album in 1991, Metallica reached heights no metal band had ever touched. Chart dominance, radio play, and cross-genre appeal. For millions, Metallica was heavy metal. But to a huge segment of the metal community, that success came with a price. Enter Megadeth. While Metallica climbed charts and polished their production, Megadeth doubled down on technical ferocity and sonic complexity. Albums like Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, So Far, So Good, So What, and Rust in Peace weren't chasing radio-friendly formulas. They were crafted to push the limits of speed, precision, and compositional ambition. And for die-hard metalheads, this made all the difference. Megadeth was the band that didn't sell out. Dave Mustaine, their frontman, was not only a guitar wizard, but also a symbol of rebellion against commercialization. The result? Fans formed tribes. There were those who admired Metallica's growth, their bold experimentation, and larger-than-life performances. And there were those who swore by Megadeth's purity, their refusal to dilute the essence of thrash. Both sides saw themselves as defenders of what metal should be, and their arguments played out on message boards, in magazine letters, and across school cafeterias around the world. The media, of course, feasted on it. Rock journalists framed every Mustaine interview as a shot fired, every Hetfield quote as a counterpunch. Even if one of them said nothing, silence was spun into subtext. Articles titled The Metal Wars or Clash of the Titans kept the narrative alive, and to some extent, both bands benefited. The rivalry created drama, and drama attracted attention. But as the years passed, fans began to see how the feud shaped their own identities. For some, liking Metallica meant embracing evolution. It meant recognizing the artistry and taking risks, from the haunting tones of "Nothing Else Matters" to the complex rhythms of "And Justice for All." For others, pledging loyalty to Megadeth meant choosing authenticity, musicianship over marketability, aggression over accessibility. Still, beneath the battle lines, most fans began to realize something deeper. Both bands were incredible. Their differences didn't have to mean one was lesser. In fact, those differences made the entire genre richer. You could respect Mustaine's pain-fueled creativity and admire Hetfield's discipline and growth. You could blast Holy Wars and Fade to Black in the same playlist. And increasingly, that's what began to happen. By the 2000s, as metal evolved and younger generations explored its roots, the old animosities started to soften. New fans didn't inherit the bitterness. They came with open ears and no need to pick sides. Online forums shifted from debates to appreciation threads. Festivals like Big Four, where Metallica and Megadeth shared the same stage, allowed fans to experience unity rather than rivalry. Still, that tribal energy never fully disappeared. There's a pulse of nostalgia in those old arguments, a thrill in debating who was really the better band. But now, it's more of a celebration than a conflict. Fans understand that the rivalry itself was part of what made both bands better. Hetfield and Mustaine didn't just push each other, they pushed their audiences to care more, to listen deeper, to invest in the music beyond surface level. Time softened the war cries, but one question kept haunting both camps. What if the past hadn't pulled them apart? The collaboration that still haunts them. By now, the rivalry between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine feels less like a personal grudge and more like a legend, etched into the DNA of heavy metal. But while most feuds fade with time, theirs still lingers, partly because of what it was, and partly because of what it could have been. The question has haunted fans for decades, whispered through forums and backstage chatter alike. What if Metallica had never let Mustaine go? What if they had found a way to make it work? It's a "what if" loaded with possibilities, especially considering what they created together in such a short, chaotic window. In less than 2 years, Hetfield and Mustaine helped lay the foundation of an entire genre. Their early collaborations were jagged and unrefined, but there was magic in that friction. And that magic sparked a wildfire that would change rock history. Mustaine has never been shy about entertaining those alternate realities. Over the years, he's floated everything from reunion ideas to collaborative projects. Some suggestions were fueled by nostalgia, others by ambition. But always, there was an undertone of unfinished business. He's even spoken publicly about having tried to reconnect with Hetfield, especially as they both grew older and weathered storms of addiction, illness, and personal loss. Hetfield, by contrast, has been more cautious. He's acknowledged the gravity of what Mustaine brought to the early Metallica sound. In interviews, he's offered glimpses of admiration, moments where he sets aside the rivalry and speaks about Mustaine's talent with real sincerity. He's also admitted to his own growth, saying that age has helped him see things from a broader perspective. But even as olive branches were extended, something always seemed to pull them back apart. One of the most striking near misses came in 2023, when Mustaine revealed in an interview with Guitar.com that he and Hetfield had discussed a potential collaboration. The concept, revisiting and reworking some of the early Metallica material they wrote together, music that still carries the fingerprints of both men, decades later. It could have been monumental. Not just a creative reunion, but a symbolic one. A way to finally close the loop. To bring full circle closure to one of metal's most important stories. But it wasn't to be. According to Mustaine, the conversation broke down when the topic of publishing rights surfaced, specifically his belief that he had never been properly credited for some of the songs they had written in Metallica's infancy. When he brought it up, he said Hetfield shut down. And just like that, the spark was gone. "I was trying to be friendly," Mustaine said, "but once I brought that up, it was over." It was a reminder of how close and how far apart these two men still are. The tragedy isn't just that the collaboration never happened, it's that they were finally talking, really talking, and history still got in the way. Old wounds reopened, and trust once again slipped through their fingers. So, what does it all mean now? Two bands, one broken bond, a legacy too powerful to ignore. Whether they ever play together again or never speak another word, their story is already written into heavy metal history. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want more untold stories from the world of music. And don't miss the next video, it's one Hetfield himself might want to see.